Yeah.
So I turn that one off and then I'm good here.
Yeah.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Board of School Estimate to order. It is Thursday, October 6th at 5:34 p.m. Mr. Burnside, would you please read the adequate notice?
Adequate written notice of this meeting of the South Orange Maplewood Board of School Estimate was sent to the township and village clerks, the Star Ledger, the News Record, tapintosoma.net, villagegreen.com, and the district website.
Thank you very much. And can we also have a roll call?
Mayor Dean Daffis,
Present.
Committeewoman Nancy Adams,
I don't know how this works.
Committee,
Hit again, sorry.
I did already. Oh, no, I did. I just like to hear myself.
Committeeman Frank McGehee,
Here.
Village President Sheena Collum,
Here.
Trustee Bobby Brown,
Here.
Trustee Karen Hilton,
I'm here.
Board President Thayer Joshua,
Here.
Board Member Arun Vadlamani.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, if we can please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome everyone. Before we get started with some just introductory remarks, I'd like to turn it over to Committeeman Frank McGehee, who had reached out a little earlier today with some concerning news.
Thank you, Chairwoman. For those who don't know, currently the country of Haiti is on the brink of civil war. There have been multiple news conferences across the country today, including one in New Jersey, which I attended in Elizabeth. Elected officials from the country level, from the national level down to the municipal level, are calling on the Biden administration to send aid immediately to Haiti and even thoughts of military support. 40% of the country is under siege by gangs, and last week the oil price was doubled, resulting in 30% of the country unable to eat. So we have a crisis in Haiti. It's not been publicly noticed as much as other issues like in Ukraine, but I'm bringing it to the attention of you all and ask you to reach out to your congresspeople. I've reached out to Mikey Sherrill, spoke with Congressman Payne today, but this is a dire situation, and the townships of Maplewood and the village of South Orange need to get involved because we are progressive and we are in line with our fellow Haitians in South Orange and Maplewood. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. So as I was saying earlier, welcome. I am so excited to be here tonight. It's great to see every one of you. I feel like I'm sitting on the dais right now with a really good dream team. As noticed to the public, this is the Board of School Estimate, and tonight we have the sole objective of learning about transportation/courtesy transportation and the tax impact that it may or may not require above the 2% tax levy cap. As you know, the Board of School Estimate is not a policy-making body, but rather we're here preemptively to talk about the upcoming budget and ways that the municipalities can partner with the school board in order to advance transportation for all of our students. We hope that this is a very productive meeting. There's not going to be formal action tonight other than perhaps a straw poll or direction that we can give to Board President Joshua and Mr. Vadlamani on how the Board of Education can prepare in thinking about additional transportation and courtesy transportation. So I thank my colleagues both from South Orange and from Maplewood, and certainly the board president for talking through some of these challenges. I think most importantly, and listening to everything that you have to share, and we know that the best way that we can resolve some of these issues is the creativity of my colleagues up here, working with our colleagues on both governing bodies and the Board of Education, professional staff, and I'm very excited for tonight, and I'm very confident that we will be able to hopefully come to some level of resolution as we proceed forward. Mayor Daffis?
Thank you, President Collum, and thank you to the school district for hosting us. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who are here in person, making the effort, and those of you who have logged in at home. I just want to highlight some of the remarks that President Collum has made. This tonight is a working group session. It is not, we are not taking formal action tonight. We are not looking backwards tonight. We are listening. We are going to become better informed about transportation costs. What does that look like? In an effort to lessen the burden of our families, of our students. Hopefully, we will come to some resolution for now and for later for a holistic transportation policy for our school district and for the two towns. This issue is important to both towns. Transportation and the health and safety of our students makes for healthy and safe communities. And transportation obviously is at the heart of integration itself. So knowing how important this is to all of us, I joined President Collum when we reached out to President Joshua and asked him and his colleagues to consider convening in this matter. The last time we met like this was when we were looking at the long-range facilities plan. And at that time, Maplewood chaired the meeting. Our tradition, our common practice is to alternate. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. And so therefore, this evening, we are going to be chaired by the awesome President Sheena Collum. So let's come to this conversation, this presentation. I understand the district has a presentation to make to show us some numbers. Let's accept that with open hearts and minds, and let's be graceful. Let's listen, and hopefully we can work together to resolve this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will just note that myself and Committeewoman Adams are at a disadvantage. It takes quite, I feel like, this is, show us you're a short person without showing us you're a short person, says our business administrator for the school district, and he has prepared a preliminary presentation for the Board of School Estimate tonight.
Thank you. You just pull it up. All right, thanks everybody for coming today. I'm going to start off with how we got here. Tonight, we're going to cover some of the history of how we got to this meeting. In April of 2021, Resolution 4128 was passed. This resolution revised Policy 8600 regarding student transportation. Also in April of 2021, Resolution 4134 was passed. This deferred the policy change with respect to courtesy transportation to the 22-23 school year. This eliminated courtesy transportation between 1 and 2 miles for select schools. And at the August 25th regular session board meeting, the following district goal was approved. By March of 2023, the superintendent of schools will develop a robust transportation plan, which will increase access to transportation district-wide for elementary students as part of the ongoing evolution of the Intentional Integration Initiative. Right now, the district currently transports 914 students in district. This consists of 44 routes being covered by 24 buses. The cost is approximately $2.6 million this year. Approximately 12.6% of the overall transportation budget is for general education students. This is an estimated amount because there are many buses that have a combination of general education students and special education students on the same bus. Also, 34% of the transportation budget is in district for general and special ed students. This is approximately 1.8% of the overall general fund budget. This is a demographic breakdown of current students eligible for transportation for both towns. So the courtesy transportation proposal. You will notice that there are two scenarios for both the elementary schools and then the middle schools. We started with evaluating the elementary schools. We found that if we extend courtesy transportation between 1 and 2 miles, the approximate impact is an additional 770 students being transported. If we reduce the distance to 1.5 and 2 miles, the estimated impact is 372 additional students being transported. For the middle schools, we first examined the distance between 1.5 and 2 miles. The approximate impact is 305 additional students. Between 1.75 and 2 miles, the approximate impact is 130 additional students. This chart shows the number of additional students by elementary school. As you can see, the schools are broken out individually. The biggest schools impacted are South Mountain, Marshall, and Bolden. At 1 mile, 770 elementary students would be eligible for courtesy transportation, and at 1.5 miles, 372 students would be eligible. And at 1 mile, approximately 18 extra buses could be needed, and at 1.5 miles, approximately 9 buses could be needed. So the calculation is approximately $1.98 million would be needed to fund courtesy transportation between 1 and 2 miles. Between 1.5 and 2 miles, approximately $990,000 would be needed to fund courtesy transportation for elementary students. This chart shows the number of additional students by middle school. At 1.5 miles, 305 students, middle school students, would be eligible for courtesy transportation, and at 1.75 miles, 130 students would be eligible. At 1.5 miles, approximately 10 extra buses could be needed, and at 1.75 miles, approximately 5 buses could be needed. Approximately $770,000 would be the potential cost to fund courtesy transportation between 1.5 miles and 2 miles for middle school students. And between 1.75 miles and 2 miles, approximately $330,000 would be estimated to fund courtesy transportation for middle school students. So this is the projected cost and tax impact. This slide shows the approximate tax impact by percentage and the estimated average tax increase in dollars for each town. These figures are based on an assessed value of $501,500 in Maplewood and $584,474 in South Orange. So at 1 mile for the elementary school, the estimated tax impact by percentage is 1.54%. For Maplewood, the average taxes would increase $148. And for South Orange, the average assessed value of a house, $584,474, would be $173 in the estimated taxes. At 1.5 miles, it would be an estimated annual tax impact of 0.77%. For the Maplewood average assessed value of $501,500, that means an estimated $74 in taxes each year. And for South Orange, it would be $87 estimated tax. For the middle schools, at 1.5 miles, the estimated annual tax impact is 0.6%. For Maplewood, that'd be $57. And for South Orange, it would be $67. And at 1.75 miles, 0.26% is the annual tax impact. Maple would be $25. South Orange would be $29. Okay. For the 23-24 tax levy, As the budget is being built for the 23-24 school year, a 1% increase is equal to $1,281,654. And a 2% increase is $2,563,308. These percentages are important because the state of New Jersey does not allow the tax levy to be in excess of 2% except for certain exclusions. Banked cap is what a district generates in a given year if, one, they do not raise the tax levy 2%, or number two, are eligible for an adjustment based on an increase in health benefit premiums or large enrollment growth. We won't know if the district is eligible for bank cap until the budget software opens up later this year. In closing, the Board of School Estimate would need to vote and approve a tax levy above 2% to fund courtesy transportation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burnside. So I'm going to start acknowledging any colleagues who might have any questions first, if we could limit to questions before we go into comments. Ms. Adams.
Let me get it. Yes, I just have a couple questions with regard to how this was ascertained. I see distance, but I don't see, was the route at all taken into account? In other words, somebody, a kid, an elementary school student crossing South Orange Avenue as opposed to one who can walk, a little
So no, these numbers were not,
strictly distance.
yeah, it was just based on students that are eligible for transportation. And these are based off of last year's numbers. We don't get this year's enrollment numbers until October 15th. That's when the state takes a snapshot in time.
Mhm.
We could always update the numbers after October 15th. But if we would have to actually build all of the routes. And it's difficult to say what the cost would be because then we have to go out to a public bid.
Right.
Can I add to that?
Mhm.
Good evening, everyone. Just to add to Mr. Burnside's response, and also this snapshot, of course, is, 11 months ahead of time, right? So between now and then, we could have 200 more kids who enter the district and 25 who leave the district. And so these are just really estimates based on distance right now from the assigned elementary schools, if that helps.
And the middle schools. Yeah.
Yes.
And the only other thought I have is if anybody's considered how many cars or families that currently drive. I doubt that's really easy to ascertain, but if there's even a thought going into how many cars would be eliminated if students were picked up and taken by bus.
That's a great consideration. We would have to hire a company to do that. We wouldn't have the capability of doing that. However, I am in contact with an engineer right now. We're trying to find a company to take care of our hazardous routes being analyzed and assessed.
Mhm.
That might be something that they could do in the future. So I don't want to just say no.
That's all I have right now.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. More questions? Well,
I have one comment.
oh, yes.
Mr. Burnside, thank you for the presentation. I don't know if this is more appropriate for you or Dr. Taylor, but as we look to next year, one of the things that are in the district goals is putting at least a kindergarten at Delia Bolden School. Could either one of you talk to what impact that may have on the numbers that we're looking at this evening?
Certainly. One of the pieces that we try to continue to reiterate in this work is that ultimately, and for those who may not have followed all this work for the last 3 to 4 or 5 years, is that ultimately all of our elementary schools outside of Montrose, of course, will be K-5 elementary schools. And so all of our construction and our expansion is to that end. And so, for example, for Marshall and Bolden, those who are familiar with those schools and their grade spans, it's going to be a significant change for them. And so there'll be more slots in those buildings to be utilized for our placement methodology. So in theory, then that should lessen the distance that students are away from their assigned school. Anything to add, Mr. Burnside?
No, I'm excited for that.
May I ask one more follow-up?
Absolutely.
I think this one is more appropriate for Mr. Burnside. The slide basically, you know, it looks 9 buses, $990,000 at 1.5 indicates it's $110,000 a bus. Can you just explain how we get to those calculations between that and then how you get from the number of students to the number of buses?
Yeah. So right now, we're paying $110,000 per bus. So I use current numbers. That's this year. When we were talking to our Sussex County Co-op and we were trying to put some parameters on some realistic numbers of how to make this calculation, they advised us, you don't want to, so a 54-passenger bus, you don't want to put 53 students on there with an aide. You want to go between 40 and 45, so we picked 43 students as a full bus. This gives us flexibility in the future if there's an increase in enrollment, backpacks, you need space for music instruments, and also gives us a little bit of control of how long that bus is on the road, so it's not on there. It's not picking up students or dropping them off for an hour and a half. So that's how we divided the student population by the 43 times 110,000, and that's how we got the cost.
Thank you.
Colleagues?
Certainly. Thank you, President Collum. And thank you, Mr. Burnside, for that presentation. I have a couple of follow-up questions, please. More so to edify some of these things for the public who may not be in the weeds as we are. Let's talk about, well, first of all, nowhere in here, these are estimates, as you stated, and it's important to state that again, and that this does not include, obviously, subscription services or costs if we were to go that route or do a hybrid and offer families that option. Yes?
So that's why we're having this conversation so early, is because to implement subscription busing, it would take approximately a year. So if we were to not move forward with this and we wanted to pursue subscription busing, that's why we're having the conversation now, to give us till next year to do that. We would hire the Sussex County Co-op. The way it was explained to me is they would send a survey out to the public to gauge interest, to make sure that it's worth everybody's while. And then based on how many people are actually interested, that's when we would start to find out how much it would cost per family. But until that survey's done, we don't have any option to calculate that.
Certainly. Can we educate the public as to whether or not, as per current spending, we are saving money from outsourcing, are we not?
That is correct.
Do you have an idea of what that looks like in terms of actual money?
That was about $1.2 million.
President Joshua, did you want to?
Where did that money go?
Salary and benefits.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. Salary and benefits. Yeah, the question was, where did that money go? Yes, sir.
We had this conversation in the F50 meeting, and it's part of the F50 minutes. I forget exactly which month this is. I'm sure we can dig it out and do that. So when we decided to outsource it, the number is 1.2, and that went directly towards teacher salaries.
Great. Let's talk about the roster of the buses themselves. Big buses, small buses, what is their capacity? Certainly one of the things we hear from families, a very reasonable inquiry, is they're seeing that a lot of these buses are empty. What seemingly is empty. Can you explain a little bit about the roster of the buses, the decision on their capacity? Where does that come from? And what does it mean if there's a seat empty? It may necessarily not be empty.
Yeah. Sure, go ahead.
I like to talk too much. I apologize. So a lot of experience with this, right? So we know that every student who's assigned to a bus is assigned based on our building of the routes, right? And so we build routes in our transportation department with the software Versatrans that we've spoken about a few times. I mean, so it tries to build reasonable routes. You don't want the bus on the road for 2 hours, as Mr. Burnside noted. But assigning a student to a bus based on the parent's application does not force the parent to place the student on the bus. The parent can choose every single day to not ride that bus, but they have the legal right to place their child on that bus any day that they would see fit. And I would explain a bus that's not full with that first explanation, and also where on the route you're seeing the bus. It could be at the beginning of the route, it could be at the end of the route. Some parents could be opting for before care or after care and pick their kids up or drop them off based on that. Additionally, we always try to emphasize how transportation is one of the most regulated services that we provide for obvious reasons. Health and safety are so paramount when we have students on a vehicle that's moving. So every student has to be accounted for, has to be pre-assigned. Every student, that way, if the most unfortunate circumstance occurs, we know who's on that bus. So it's not optional for us to place students on the bus in a haphazard way. Anything to add, Mr. Burnside?
No, you did a very good job. Thank you.
Actually, I'm going to quickly interrupt. In earlier conversations with Board President Joshua, he had also explained that some of the buses right now are 54-passenger buses, but they're actually intended to be smaller buses. Could you also explain that as well?
Yes, I almost forgot. This is attributed to the bus shortage. So they might only need a 24-passenger bus, but they can't, the bus company, but they can't buy one right now. So they have to use a 54-passenger bus until that shipment comes in, and then they'll swap them out.
Thank you. Back to you, Mayor Daffis.
Thank you. Following up on that, do we have any idea if that's going to happen anytime soon?
That I don't know. So we were going to wait until, once again, after October 15th, where we take that snapshot in time. And then we were going to reach out to the bus company and try to find out what is the capacity look like. Right now, they're still making adjustments, trying to figure out their routes, try to start them earlier if needed, and then we'll go from there. But after October 15th, I was going to reach out and find out what the empty seat capacity looks like.
Thank you. No further questions from me from now.
Okay. Mr. McGehee?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Just a couple questions. When you presented these scenarios, you have made a decision for pre-K to fifth grade to start for 1 mile out. So there's a 1 to 2 mile scenario, and there's 1.5 to 2 mile scenario. Yet with the middle school, you start at the baseline of 1.5 to 2 miles, and then you truncate it 50% to 1.75 to 2. Just for, I guess, for the education of the public and just for myself, why did we not have a consistent 1 to 2 mile decision here in terms of this information?
I'm going to defer to President Joshua.
Thank you.
Because when we had this conversation in our FFC committee, when we were looking at what the possible funding would be, we decided that based on feedback we've heard, that leaving it at 1.5 would be a way to mitigate some what we expect to be additional expense. So instead of going all the way down to 1 mile for the middle school, we went to 1.5. We've also seen those numbers that they were, I don't remember them, but I remember that it's, because if you just think about it, we have 7 elementary school buildings, 6, right? So it's not a lot of people who are going to live more than 1 mile from their school versus when you have only 2 middle schools, a lot of people are going to live more than 1 mile away from either of the middle schools, particularly when we move forward with the 7th and 8th grades of the integration plan next year. So by doing only 1.5, you're cutting that down substantially to what the numbers could even be if you went all the way down to 1 mile at the 2 middle schools.
I would think that would also be their older kids. They can walk farther.
Yeah. Which leads me to my second question, and that is looking at the numbers for the elementary school. You know, the full impact for Maplewood is at $148 is $12.33 a month if you break it down accordingly. Now, my question is, if I also add in, you know, the lowest threshold or floor for the middle school at $57, then now we're getting down to about $17 and change per month for every average household. Percentage-wise, 72.4% of this increase at the lowest threshold is for the elementary schools. which is interesting because aligning with the integration plan, we know that for this integration plan to work, we really need to integrate our elementary schools because having a daughter who's gone through MMS, that's when everyone comes together and that's going to be naturally integrated. So with that being said, understanding those two scenarios and reading the room in terms of our constituents, do you feel more comfortable in a phased approach where we focus on the elementary schools first versus the middle school, or do you think we should package them? I'd love to get some thought on that.
I can share just from my responses to parents who've reached out to us, the vast majority, 90% or so, are elementary parents. The number of middle school parents who've reached out is single digits. So I think that if you're trying to ascertain what the highest priority of concern that I've received, it would be elementary. And I think that one of the some of the feedback from those parents, they're 1.9 miles away, 1.95 miles away. They're right on the cusp. And I think that also with our expansion of Bolden for the kindergarten classes will alleviate that kind of organically as well. So this is probably the worst case scenario based on the estimate that we have. But I can understand the concern of trying to meet a middle school question that really hasn't been as intense or asked as many times.
Appreciate the narrative, Dr. Taylor. Madam Chair, I yield the floor back to you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vadlamani, I know that you're a Board of Education member, but and you are the chair of your FFT committee, but are there questions that you have?
Actually, yes, I do. I mean, first of all, thank you for making the presentation. I know that, projecting transportation costs is more of an art than an exact science. So, thanks for doing that. And can you talk a little bit about why we are here? Like, I mean, I don't want you to go into details of but to explain why we are here in the sense that we are allowed up to 2% increase and we are asking for something more than that. So where is that original 2% going in large terms? So that way people are clear that, we're here asking for more and why we're doing it. Why could we not stick this into the 2% cap? I'm sorry.
So I think your question is, why are we here? Because we have to go above the 2% cap. And then that rolls into what is the Board of School estimate. And I was going to ask our attorney, Frances Fevers, if she could explain a little bit about the Board of School estimate and how it works.
Hey, I think the question is more of what are we putting the 2% towards that we can't put it towards transportation?
Oh, I'm sorry. So great question. We're looking at about over a 15% increase in healthcare costs right now, and that's going to take place in January. And unfortunately, that was an unbudgeted item. So we're going to have to scramble to find that. One of the revenues that we're going to use for that was when we sold our buses, when we outsourced. We were able to make a little bit of a profit on those, and we're going to be able to use that money towards our healthcare costs. It's not going to fulfill it, but it's definitely going to help. Does that help? Okay.
Explains it. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And I'll also add that the municipalities are experiencing the same thing with healthcare. South Orange and Maplewood did advocate very hard for this not to go through, but we know the impact because our largest apportionment of all of our respective budgets goes to salary, wages, and by extension, healthcare costs and pension costs. So we are going to be hit equally as hard in the upcoming budget season. Mr. Burnside, did you already address earlier if you had any banked cap available? Is that number 0?
Right now it is, but we won't find out for sure until when the budget software opens up later this year.
Okay.
But we didn't have any last year. And because of Chapter 44, our healthcare benefits technically decreased a little bit. So we weren't even actually able to go to the full 2% cap last year.
You actually did a very good job on the budget last year. I was surprised given all the increase in costs and especially the damage we incurred from Ida. The other question that I had for you is, gosh, I think I already lost it. There was the banked cap And then there was also, I had already spoken to President Joshua, but you don't anticipate any additional cost above this proposal that would need to come back to the Board of School Estimate at this time?
For this transportation, no, I don't. We base these numbers conservatively as best we could as kind of a worst-case scenario, but it gives us room to make it it's sustainable going forward. And that was our whole approach.
Okay, and one last one for you. In the municipalities, we have a, what some people call a surplus, but it really isn't. It's the fund balance. Do you have monies available in the fund balance to do anything immediately in this calendar year, or no?
No.
Okay, well, that was very clear. Mr. Brown, I'm going to go back to you.
I would, if you wouldn't mind, I think you were going to defer to the attorney to talk about just not what the board estimates is, but in terms of this decision making. And I know sounds like the costs of healthcare and insurance is going up, and that was not in the budget. You didn't foresee that happening. And I guess I would just ask sort of, only because I'm newer to this setting, how did that oversight happen, and how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? And then for this body, where does this body, where does it play a role in making sure it doesn't happen again? I know that there's been a lot of buildup here, so it's sort of historical, but it would be helpful for me.
Yeah.
I can just offer a lead into that. It is not unusual for our healthcare costs to increase in mid-January. During the pandemic, we didn't see that. That was the first time in my 11 years in New Jersey as a leader that we didn't see that impact increase. So we all thought that we don't have anything to go on. We just work with our healthcare broker to anticipate. And this increase that Mr. Burnside is speaking of is going to be the highest that I've seen in my career. And I think that what he's sharing is we are able to cover those costs. But when asking why we are here trying to talk about this increase potentially, if the Board of Education chooses to go with a policy shift for next year, we would not be able to do that within the 2% cap that's part of our budget for next year at this time. But please.
Also, when we're calculating all this stuff, we rely on our broker, and for 2-3 consecutive years, our healthcare costs actually went down a little bit. So it was incredibly difficult to see this when just last year they gave us a $1 million holiday. We got to skip a month of our premium, and then for them to just raise the rates like this is it's unfathomable.
Can I add one thing to that? It's just that boards of education across the whole state are dealing with this. Many boards across the state passed resolutions asking the state to defer or decrease the amount of increase for healthcare benefits because so many districts had not anticipated, a high double-digit expense increase, and they're all struggling to cover it. So this is not unique to South Orange Maplewood.
Also, we don't get our rates until after the budget's already set.
And that does not sound like it works very well for planning. And then the last part sort of just, again, more historical, but also looking forward in terms of the 2% cap and the decisions that this body makes relative to the 2% cap. Is this something that happens off? Like, how often do we get to this point where you have to consider the cap? And I'm assuming the options that you have in order to have a one-time excuse of you being excused from I don't know what it's called, the actual terminology, but how often does this happen?
This is my first time, so I really don't know.
So I can share a little bit. When I first arrived in New Jersey as a superintendent, at that time, every budget would go to the public for a vote. every single time. And if the public voted that budget down, then it would go to the townships to consider whatever the Board of Education was proposing. I believe it was maybe 6 or 7 years ago or so when the governor shifted that, that process and gave districts a 2% cap, meaning that you could exceed your current levy by 2%. Without having to go out for a vote. And so in our case, because we are a Board of School Estimate Governance process, we don't go to the public, we come to this body if we anticipate having to exceed 2%. And that also is based on the Board of Education getting us to the 2% cap, because we can't consider this until that is met.
And I imagine all other considerations have been taken to explore options that would not include busing.
Well, I think what we would say is that we're being proactive now to determine where we are with possibilities, because perhaps we'll have a windfall that from the state that we don't anticipate. But for now, for us to know and work and build and even talk about subscription, we have to know what this body is comfortable with within reason, right? So it just kind of gives us permission to plan.
Thank you for answering the questions. Helpful.
Trustee Brown, I'm just going to add one more perhaps clarification to this is I think I've been watching too long. So there was a long-range facilities plan that we had approved, which was last time the Board of School Estimate had convened. And then prior to that, I believe it was somewhere around 2008, just because there's some records of South Orange and Maplewood. So I would say overall, it's very infrequent. And for the benefit of the public, because I think we know a little bit more about this, there are so many things out of cap. I almost think it's not a fair representation anymore. When we talk about the 2% cap, it was put in a time when the state actually provided us with the resources to make sure that we stayed within the cap. Those type of things are all gone, and yet there's this imaginary 2% cap. If you look at the past year between inflation, like I just said, the State Health Benefits Commission is increasing cost 23%, right, for the municipalities. That's outside of cap, right? So even though we arbitrarily say 2% cap on the things that stay within cap, some of the largest drivers of the budget are outside of cap. So that's why you may see a 2.7% increase, a 3% increase, 4, 5, 6, et cetera. But those tools are no longer there. So I think the budgets are challenging, but we continue to hear about this 2% cap. But when the state no longer provides us with the mechanism to control the budget and stay within that cap, it makes it a little bit more difficult for us.
Well said.
Thank you very much. Mr. McGehee?
Thank you, Chairwoman. So I just want to go back into the cost a little bit. And I'm looking at the estimated increase in transportation cost. I'm using buses, and I know we had a little bit of a conversation about that as a baseline. And I'm assuming, because I'm looking at the range. So if I look at the scenario of 5 buses in the for middle school students at 1.75 miles, if I just use, pure math, it's $66,000 per incremental bus. Now, I'm not assuming or saying that that's the cost of the bus, but then if you slide over, then it's $77,000, right? For 10 incremental buses at $770,000. When I go and look at the elementary schools for both 1 mile, 1.5 mile in both scenarios, it's $110,000 per bus. So there is a sliding scale from $66,000 to $110,000. I'd like to get a little more of a deeper dive between the cost, fixed, and variable, why there's such a sliding rule here, and then subsequently understand that to see if we can apply that to the middle school, from the middle school to the elementary school, please.
Yep. Great catch. My apologies. I was working on this presentation right till everybody walked in. The 10 buses, I believe, should be 7. 7 buses. That's how we got to the 770,000.
So which number is accurate, so I'm clear?
7.
7 buses, yes.
7 buses.
Yeah.
This is
basically three times.
Got you. So seven buses for 770 and 3 buses for 330, which would be the 110. Okay,
Yeah.
all
Sorry.
right.
Yes.
No worries. I'm paying attention. And since we're on this, and I appreciate the clarification, is that number apples to apples? So each bus cost, I'm assuming there's some other costs baked into that for the bus, or is it just pure bus costs?
So one bus costs $110,000.
Okay, so there's no other cost for anything else, just the bus itself physically?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Right, that's I'm asking for other variable costs associated with the bus.
So yeah, the transportation company gives us this number with all of those costs baked in
They're
there.
baked in, they're blended. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Chairwoman.
Thank you. My question is actually more probably for this body than Mr. Burnside, is that let's assume that we approve, the body approves an increase. Will that be the floor for the next budget cycle? Or is that outside of the budget cycle? Okay, right.
That is correct. Can I do your job? That's correct. It's an annual reoccurring cost. So it's it's already going to set the standard, but it's not going to go up. Say it's 1 percentage point 3 every year. Once you set the new baseline, then it comes back to the school board for you to determine what your next levy is going to be.
I have a question. Mr. Burnside, you mentioned earlier about subscription transportation. Obviously, this is a conversation that has come up in the board's FFT committee. My question is, can we go ahead and plan for it even if we don't end up using it? Because what happens with it doesn't sound like it costs the district a huge amount of time to do that, since it would be mostly the co-op doing it. I don't know if we have to pay the co-op to do that. Do we, what would be, maybe Dr. Taylor can answer when he returns, what is the estimated time effort to plan for a subscription as either a backup or an add-on to any future transportation planning?
Well, I think we'd have to make a decision. I don't know that. So we're going to pay a fee to the Sussex County Co-op to implement this for us. I guess we could ask them if they would be willing to work with us and just see if there's an option to back out if we don't really want to pursue it. I don't know that answer.
Okay, so let me ask it this way. Could the district do a survey, and maybe it's just a yes/no survey of interest in courtesy transportation to help fuel future decision-making around whether or not it's worth pursuing with the co-op? And I presume that's actually for Dr. Taylor, so I'll repeat it. Dr. Taylor, the question is, can the district, is there bandwidth, if the board so desired, to implement a transportation survey that would help inform the district as to whether or not the parent or the guardians, parents of students would actually be interested in pursuing a subscription transportation option? I know we've seen it in emails, but those are emails, and I'm very curious when actually presented with the option, what folks would say.
We could definitely do that. I think that part of what would assist in that is helping to share what other districts are charging for this, right? And I think that we'd also have to look at the considerations to make this an equitable process, of course, right? That, how are other districts ensuring that students whose families are not able to afford it based on being a free reduced lunch student or a student who has another designation or a certain salary, family, household salary level, some kind of impartial way to calculate that. But, we can work towards that for sure.
Well, I'm going to
President Combs.
I'm going to briefly interrupt because Trustee Hilton has been waiting patiently on WebEx, but she's behind me. So,
Chairwoman, could I just follow up on that before we let?
yeah,
Trustee
sure.
Hilton.
Trustee Hilton, just 1 second, and
I
we
just want
have
to
a
make her wait
follow-up
a little
question.
longer. Following up on that, if there's, what I heard you say before is that there were very few calls from parents in the district wanting their middle school or needing their middle school children
me
bus to you directly.
Yes.
But given that you compared it to the number of elementary, conceivably, it's probably similar, right? That there's less of a demand on middle school. And as we've all said, I mean, I was 1 block from the 2 mile line when I was in middle school, so I walked 2 miles to and from every day. So aside from that, I'm just wondering whether or not we're looking at not providing the middle school buses, whereas the elementary school is more important for a few other reasons that have been mentioned here.
That would probably be a ongoing board conversation because it would be impacted by the policy that's set. And Mr. Burnside and I are part of those committees and give feedback and our insights on this, but I couldn't speak for the committee that would recommend what would happen next for the full board. But the fact that it's here, I think that we want to just be as transparent as we can about what the impact would be.
Yeah, I would just suggest to follow up on the, board president's comment that maybe it's not just about whether you'd want this kind of busing of subscription, but do you actually need it? Do you want it? Go ahead.
Trustee Hilton, thank you so much. The mic is yours.
You bet. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. I'm so sorry I'm not with you. I really feel disappointed. Family circumstances called me to be away. Thank you to the district and the superintendent for doing all this hard work. But I do feel a little frustrated that we're having this discussion in a silo. And I don't feel like as President Collum said, we're not ready. We're not going to make a final decision tonight, but I do want to make sure that the Board of School estimate is included in your fiscal discussions moving forward. Our job for the Board of School estimate is the money, is the fiscal accountability and the fiscal work. Your job is to tell us what you want to do. So it was very interesting and helpful to see the numbers, and I appreciate that the numbers were so high. But at the end of the day, we need to know what is it that you want to do. That there's we're not able to make any kind of concrete decisions yet. That being said, there are so many other parts of the budget that I need to make sure that you guys, and I'm sure you are, but we need to have a more in-depth discussion about your overall budget. And I'm sure you are, but just to make sure that you're, looking under every single rock for that extra set of pennies. And I know you are, but we do need to make sure that we're operating in as fiscally tight and careful as we can. That being said, our school district, all of us feel like there's nothing more important than having healthy, strong schools. I have 4 children that went through this district. They went to Marshall and then Jefferson. That was what was then Jefferson. But I absolutely love our schools, and I want to make sure that we get this right. Change is hard, and but I know that we can get this right. But we don't have all the information in front of us that we need to have. So sorry, that's more of a statement than a question, but just wanted to say it.
So just so you know, Trustee Hilton is the chair of our Finance Committee, as you likely can imagine. So she is a fiscal hawk on the Board of Trustees. But I do want to make clear to those tuning in is that this meeting is happening in reverse order by design. Typically, the schools would approach its municipal partners at a later date once they have determined, what the actual budget is going to be and what the request of the Board of School estimate would be if there is anything above the tax levy cap. In this particular instance, as I mentioned, myself and Mayor Daffis and Board President Joshua were talking throughout the summer when this issue was very much percolating. So I would say it's almost the municipalities who requested that this meeting occur so that we could provide some level of direction to the Board of Education as it looks at its planning, given the significance of the importance of transportation. As I mentioned earlier, we don't decide policy, but this particular issue has a lot of overlap with our municipal responsibilities. We've talked about hazardous routes, crossing guards, impact on staffing at the police departments. There's a lot of resources that are not just from the schools, but also from the towns. So when we came together and said, let's partner and figure out if we can work out a way together, it was that approach and not because the board has come to us. So they are learning at the same way that we are, and they are having the conversations in the committee, which leads me to a question for either board member Vadlamani or for board president Joshua, is because we're not privy to some of the policy discussions you're having right now. Are you looking at subscription? Are you looking, like, where are you in the process, and how do you feel your colleagues feel about what we're discussing tonight, if you have any indicator of that?
What I can say to start is that as we sort of map how we got here, that after the decisions were made to encourage transportation, there was never any discussion to just bring it back in its a pre-existing form. Its pre-existing form was very inequitable throughout the district, and any conversations we had were something that would be holistic. So it would be like the numbers you see here, which would be any elementary student at 1.5, for example, not just elementary students who were grandfathered into a pre-existing integration plan, or people who were not part of the triple I, or people who had a sibling who was going to a school, and so they were assigned to that school and got transportation as a result, even though their next door neighbor was being assigned to the same school, but was not part of a sibling preference, and so they did not get transportation. It also took into account that we have neighborhoods that were 1.4 miles away that didn't get transportation to one school, while others who were 1.5 did. And so when anything we wanted to do was going to be sort of across the board. With that in mind, we, back in July, asked the district, we know the budget just started, and we knew, as Board Member Valamani called it, a Hail Mary, the Hail list of all Hail Marys. What could we do this year? Looking at the budget. And it would be basically, we looked at 1.5 and 1.75 for elementary schools because we knew we couldn't afford anything less than that. Going forward, I would say there is, as you look at our district goal as well as our board goal, there is definitely an appetite to provide more transportation, but we recognize that more transportation costs money. And so if there is an appetite for that, it has to be in a way that, again, as I said earlier, is across the board. Looking at these numbers, I mean, I have my personal preference, but
Let's not go into that yet.
right, you're asking me to speak on behalf of the board. I think the only thing I'm very comfortable saying right now is that the board is interested in providing additional transportation.
Okay.
As part of that conversation, I
As
asked
long
Mr.
as it's
Burnside.
equitable
Right.
and across the board.
Yeah, one other thing I want to add is that, as part of the conversation, I asked Mr. Burnside, when would he need to know? As he develops his overall budget, he told me December, which is why we sort of back to let's have a discussion now so that you have time. We know your office is very busy, not just with transportation, but with, construction happening in most of our elementary schools, and more construction about to happen. We have bids coming up at our next 3 public meetings to award, I think it's 4 contracts. So, with the office being what it is, giving them the bandwidth and the time to take this information and take whatever they get out of this meeting tonight and then begin the planning process. So by December, he can have an idea of what to plan for, so that when the budget is passed, they can go and bid out the routes ahead of time. And as he talked about from the resource issue, get the buses before others do.
Thank you very much for that. And a follow-up with Mr. Burnside. Again, I'll just point to President Joshua had shared some things with me so I could prepare for this meeting. He indicated that we are looking at some conservative numbers right now, just to make sure there's enough wiggle room with whatever we commit to. At $110,000 a bus, do you know any traditional figures when we're not in this labor shortage, supply shortage, et cetera? Is that like standard deviation closer to 20%, 40%? How more expensive is this than traditional busing before all this kind of chaos ensued?
Well, I would have to, go ahead. We would have to research that. I would like to go back before the pandemic and look at those numbers. Sorry, I don't have that.
But it is fair to share with the Board of School Estimate and the public that these are very conservative figures that you believe would be on the high side if there's any desire to proceed with expanding transportation.
Yes, that's a reasonable statement, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to keep going for questions before we go into comments. So let's circle back around again and see what people have.
You're staring at me, so I'll just follow up on that. With regard to, these are the conservative costs, as you said, Chairwoman, but this, once we start this, it's like anything else. Once it's there, it's in the budget. And it's wear and tear on the buses, like how long does that 110,000 bus last? You know, like, so I think it's fair for us and for the public to know what those numbers are going forward, not just for the first year we would implement the transportation, because as we've seen with our jitneys in our municipalities, you know, $2 per ride doesn't cover it, right? So it's something that, you know, I think the administration really needs to kind of look 5 years out or 10 years out and what the replacement level is for the buses, just more information than just, if we do it 1 year, this is how much it'll cost. So I guess that's more than a comment, but we're happy to receive.
I think that because it's through the cooperative pricing, similar to how we go through the Morris County Cooperative, is that's the flat rate for the year. And we don't know because cooperatives go out to bid. That's how you get the lowest bidders and you get the contractors for both the district or the municipalities. It's the same. So each year, the lowest bidders are the ones that you can utilize from the cooperative. And I think when you exhaust that, you can go out to bid, but you're likely to get much higher numbers. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, it is. And when we do our bids, we also put a clause in there that, for instance, if you win the bid, your buses can't be any older than 7 years. So we make sure that we're not getting buses that are going to break down in the middle of the routes and cause kids to be late. So we protect the district in that respect.
Ms. Adams, does that help answer your question a little bit better or no?
Not really. It's only mostly because I just feel like there's a lot of costs associated with it that I'm not hearing being addressed going forward.
No, go ahead, that's I'll go after you.
And so perhaps the concern is thinking that we're purchasing the buses versus going with the vendor. So we're not purchasing the buses, we're going with an annual contract with someone who is providing the services. So that additional wear and tear or breakdowns, et cetera, it wouldn't come to us. We're governed strictly by the contract that we have with that vendor, if that helps.
That helps a little, but it's still with that vendor, I assume their costs will rise. Go ahead.
President Joshua?
Yeah, one thing I think we should all be mindful of and consider is to one of the points I made earlier, which is the adaptation, I'm messing that word up, of Delia Bolden having kindergarten, right? As that school becomes K through 5 and as the integration plan further develops, you're not going to have as many students who live more than, let's say, 1.5 from their elementary school. Right now, what you have that is because of the pre-existing Marshall Bolden pairing and those families who chose to opt into South Boynton. As the opt-in sort of goes away and as the Marshall Bolden pairing decouples and you have K through 5 at both schools, you're not going to have large numbers of people that are more than 2 miles from their school, right? So the sort of mandated transportation that we have to do, that number is likely to go down because there won't be that many students who are placed at schools more than 2 miles. So the combination of the two, I think these numbers are high now, but I think they would go down in the future because most people will be within 2 miles. So you're looking at either, whether it's 1 or 1.5, you're right. That's not, you don't have this high number of 2 that we deal with right now, which is, basically all we're doing is the 2. And we didn't talk about, the mandated IEPs, which is something else, but mandated 2 is going to go down because more students there won't be as many students placed in schools more than 2 miles away from the elementary school. I hope that helps.
More questions? Okay, so I'm going to open up for comments. The one thing I want to reiterate this again is we don't know the exact number yet. There's still a process to go through. I'm sure our partners on the Board of Education understand that we want them to thoroughly review the budget that they're going through, as they often do. And then we are the last step in this. So again, we are giving direction. We are not voting on a set amount or setting what that additional tax levy is going to be. Just want to make sure we're framing it correctly. So colleagues who would like to start off. Please, not all at once. Who would like to start with comments or feedback on how you feel about these various options? Yes. No, not yet. Okay.
So, I mean,
Madam President,
sorry, go ahead.
let's go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Trustee Hilton.
thank you so much. I'll just add one more comment. I do feel like we're still missing, or we're talking about the elephant in the room, and I'd still really like to hear from the superintendent. While we do live far from a perfect world, I'd like to hear his recommendation on what he would like to be happening with transportation.
Yeah, at this time, I don't have a formal recommendation. I think that part of why we are here is to understand what the ceiling is for our planning purposes. I know that part of our ongoing discussions over the last 3 years around intentional integration was understanding that part of this work was going to be utilizing proximity to do all that we could to limit the need for additional transportation so that we wouldn't blow the budget on transportation. And so we accomplished that, but I also understand and recognize this body and their need to understand what is possible and our board's needs to understand what is possible. And so I'm here to listen and work with Mr. Burnside as we work through our budget planning. But right now, I do not have a formal recommendation for any of these particular offerings.
Thank you. Board Member Vadlamani?
So my view on transportation has always been that the more transportation we provide, the better it is for the parents, the easier it is for them to do other things, and good for our society as a whole. I mean, that's just my view. So I think we should go for the maximum allowed. I mean, what we have think, well, maximum being, of course, I mean, we're not doing 0-0.
Can I have a bus?
You know what, actually, I mean, different problems.
No.
Let's stick to the students first. So obviously, giving something like a 0-0, that basically means we have bus to everyone, is impractical. I mean, that's just is, we can't afford that, right? So that's why, in fact, if you notice, we've started at 1.5 and 1.0. So 1.0 for elementary because the kids are smaller, and 1.5 for middle school because the kids are larger, and nothing for high school because those are really big kids. Mm-hmm. So so this is the most practical view we've come up with. So my recommendation is to have 1.0 and higher for K5, 1.5 and higher for middle school. But I do agree with Board President Joshua in the sense that it needs to be equitable, which it is, and we need to keep all those lenses in mind. And as a ultimate practical backup, a hedge, if you will, I mean, coming from the hedge fund world, is that we need to have a subscription-based busing. Because we may use 0 today, but maybe 2 years from today, we may not be able to afford it. So starting with subscription busing today and having a small chunk of people using it can always backfill tomorrow for whatever reason. If we cannot increase the budget and we say, you know what, middle school is going to be back to 2 miles. But then at least we can still offer subscription busing and to everyone, and and in an equitable way again. So that's my view. So my recommendation is 1.0, 1.5 with subscription.
Madam Chair. To be clear, you're saying subscription busing this calendar school year or next calendar school year?
Based on what I understand, there's nothing going to happen this calendar school year. I'm sorry. Okay. It's unfortunate that, I wish we could have done something this calendar school year. That's why we were talking about the project Hail Mary. I doubt if anything will happen. Unlikely. Okay. I mean, I'm open to all suggestions, but this is all for the next school year. Okay. Everything. So that way we're starting early today, almost a year ahead of time. We'll have enough time to plan for the budget. I doubt if we should expect the transportation policy to be firmed up by the Board of Education sometime early spring, because it takes time to pull all these things in and get all the numbers back. Give some indication to the business office saying that, hey, this is coming your way, so that way they can start looking into their budget and pulling things in. Right? And give enough time to the co-op to go out and survey the parents and figure out how many will come. Maybe nobody will come. No, we don't know, or maybe there'll be a huge demand. We don't know that. So that's my recommendation.
And I was keen on hearing that from you because not only do you serve on this board, but you're also on the Board of Ed. And to Trustee Hilton's point, we're looking for some direction and guidance from the board in addition to our superintendent and business officer. That helps us kind of frame where we go in terms of moving forward and what's palatable, we think theoretically for our residents, which we proudly represent. There's several scenarios that have been presented this evening, and I appreciate Mr. Burnside's efforts on these. And I talked about some of the breakdowns of them as such. Chairwoman Collins asked to give some type of feedback of where we stand currently. And I will communicate publicly that I'm in favor of some type of transportation. My keen focus is, I'm calling it scenario A, which is the
Mr.
elementary
McGehee,
schools.
before you continue
Yes.
on, could I just ask one question of clarification to Board Member Vadlamani?
Of course, Chairwoman.
Thank you so much. Mr. Vadlamani, I just want to make sure I documented this correctly. It was 1 mile for all elementary school, K through 5, is that correct?
1 mile and higher for K to 5
Okay, and then for middle school,
is
1.5
1.5 miles and higher.
and higher. And then you had mentioned subscription. What was that for?
So we should start the idea of subscription busing right now. Not,
Okay.
we shouldn't wait for it for next year or when things may not be good.
So
Let's start today.
for the students not included in the
Correct. So that would mean
recommendation.
basically subscription busing for, well, it depends, right? I mean, we're looking at the most optimistic scenario.
I understand. That's perfect. And
what-
you're doing that in committee, but we don't have to vote on subscription.
No, correct.
So-
I understand.
Perfect. No, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. Mr. McGehee, please continue.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And you mentioned subscription this year, but I thought you were talking next. You confused me there, actually.
Yeah. No, everything is for next year.
Okay.
But we start this year because it takes 1 year for the Sussex Co-op
Got you.
to do a parental survey,
Okay.
to come back with the survey, and in spring say that, oh, so many people want it, we can offer it, this is the cost, we talk about the cost, and then we can put it into a policy.
Perfect.
The lead time is about 6 months.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. So Chairwoman, you're asking the matrix question, which I've already done myself here on the chart. So, we have really 4 separate scenarios. Option A is elementary school 1 mile. Option 2 or B is elementary schools 1.5 miles. Option C or 3 is middle school 1.5 miles. And option D or 4 is middle school 1.75 miles. When I did a matrix of the scenarios, I came up with 4 different versions. And the one that I'm keenly focused on is really A, and that is elementary schools 1 mile plus. And the reason why I align with that is because I think if we really want to take a minute to think about our integration plan, if it's going to be successful, we need to make sure that we provide all the tools to the community so that there's no rationale or excuses not to move forward with that. So Chairwoman, with that being said, I am in favor of option A, which is elementary schools 1+ mile out as how we would move forward theoretically in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. McGehee. And given that Mr. Vadlamani had also said option A included. There you go. All right, so I guess we're going in this direction? Sure.
So when you say that you only wanted kindergarten, K5 1.0, are you saying that middle school will remain as is, 2.0 and higher? Or would you, okay.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
That is correct.
Correct.
When I went through the numbers earlier, remember I talked about it, 72.5% of the incremental cost is focused solely on A for the Maplewood residents. And also that coupled with the culture of our community, that makes the most sense financially and logically and from a community perspective.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
I'm not actually going in order, so whoever would like to speak, I'm happy to recognize. Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Chairwoman. So it's no surprise where I stand on this. I've spoken publicly about it at different times. I've always been in favor of a 1 mile and focusing on our elementary school students because that is the greatest need. That is who we hear from over and over again. And let's be real and honest, that makes the most sense, right? And certainly, I don't think anyone here tonight, at least openly, is going to say that they don't support greater transportation in order to support our integration that we worked so hard for. It's absolutely necessary. And you can already see in social media threads how some people, the people who were against integration, are using this as a reason to start dismantling integration itself and dividing the community. But that being said, we're not taking a vote tonight. And who cares what I think, frankly, because we are here to find out from the board, not Dr. Taylor or Mr. Burnside. Thank you both for your efforts tonight, of course. But what is the board looking at doing? It is the board's policy. It is the board's responsibility to direct and guide the superintendent accordingly, and then bring us in this capacity if we have to go outside of the levy cap. So let's just put that on the record. Let's put that on the record. It is the board's responsibility to make a recommendation. Now, the board spoke tonight through President Joshua and the other board member that we have here. And they said that they are in favor of more transportation, and we should find out a little bit more what that means. But I also think it's important, as Trustee Hilton mentioned, and Committee Member Adams, my colleague, mentioned, what we're looking at right here is great. It really illuminates a lot of things we didn't know about, but it really is a conversation we're having in a silo. Because there are other costs that are not here, because these are conservative costs. And working on municipal budgets, we know there are other things like pending litigation, for instance. What does that look like? What is the budget? We haven't seen the budget. Again, don't misrepresent or misquote me. Village Green, I'm looking at you. I'm not saying that I don't trust what we have here. I trust this effort. Thank you, these numbers. But there are other things that are part of the bigger picture, which is a reason why this is a very, very preliminary discussion, working group session tonight. And also because I've been a student of this issue, and I've gone and spoken to other school districts nearby, similarly situated, also for integration, also coming out of COVID, also facing health benefits and all these unforeseen costs, who have found a way at a 1 mile radius for the little ones. And we have to find that way, but we need to stop doing it as a reaction. We need to be part of the conversation all along the way. So I hope that we will convene again after October 15th, when we have a greater idea of the budget. And we know better about subscription services. And when we know better about the bus rosters, the bus roster itself, because it could just very well be that the buses we were given because of supply chain issues are going to remain the way they are, meaning the bigger buses. So maybe we could figure out a way, maybe we should figure out a way to let additional students ride them if we're not going to get those other buses that we contracted for until January, February, March. Which is why in my original remarks, I said we're convening this meeting to see what we can do now and what we can do later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Board President Joshua.
Thank you, President Collum. And thank you so far to Board Member Valimani, Committee McGehee, and Mayor Daffis for their comments so far. I've been inspired by some of the things I've been hearing, and clearly there's a desire to hear some sort of direction. But I just want to clarify a few things before I go into my thoughts. The first is that there is, and we've had all the NGSBA training, we can always use more While the board does, so the director superintendent, we don't do it blindly. We don't put the district in a position to fail. We don't do things that we don't think are possible. If we think something is possible, we will push and ask for it to be done, but we don't put the district in position to do things that they think are impossible, right? We've all had conversations. We've asked the director, I've asked the business administrator and superintendent to go out and investigate more information on transportation. We just got a survey from 50 BAs in transportation departments who talked about what they offered. If they offer courtesy transportation, if they do, how do they fund it, and what mileage delineation marks that they use to do so. That's part of informing our decision making, right? But I know none of those districts are currently working through a $160 million facilities bond because no one in the state is, right? So when I hear from anyone that we aren't doing enough, I always think about the $160 million bond and the fact that we had a $160 million bond because this community had been so apathetic towards school taxes for so long, and deferred maintenance, that we had to finally put together a $160 million bond. Now, from a Board of Education perspective, most of those folks are not here. But from the municipality's perspective, some of you are, and you understand, you saw the pictures, you saw the work, you saw that the number was originally 217 million. It was originally whittled down to 93. Support came for roofs and for HVAC in all the buildings, and that's how we got around to 157, 158. We just used 160 as the round number, but I believe the actual number is $157.9 million. I just want to reiterate, I think I said this earlier, that we don't make these policies without recommendations. We would not have put together this goal if the district did not think that they could achieve it. And the goal is to provide more transportation. It's part of this is to do the research to figure out what is possible, what is sustainable. I'll now go into what I would do, what my recommendation would be, to whatever extent I have the authority, which I don't really have one, but as one voice here this evening, what I would do. What I would do, looking at these numbers, is ask the district to pursue 1.5 transportation at the elementary school level. Well, I shouldn't say elementary because it's pre-K through 5, to be clear. Pre-K through 5 at the 1.5 level. And I would ask for that for the 23-24 school year, and see what transportation looks like as we move forward before making a further recommendation to go down to 1 mile for the 24-25 school year. I would not recommend moving forward with middle schools at this time, other than to possibly investigate a shuttle from the Hilton neighborhood to MMS, which is something that we have gotten requests for as a board in the past. We currently operate one from that neighborhood to CHS, and it has been very successful. And we have gotten commentary from the MMS HSA about offering something similar. And I would ask the district to investigate that. I would also ask the possibility for subscription if there is a desire to go below 1.5 for the 23-24 school year, that it be on a subscription-only basis. And then revisit that conversation, I guess, this time next year, or probably spring of 2025. By that time, if I'm not mistaken, most of the construction projects would be done. And it will have a much better picture of what our schools are going to look like, what their capacity is, and what enrollment numbers will be. Because also, if I'm not mistaken, essentially if everyone except those, I believe they would be fifth graders. No, hold on, let me do this math. Everyone except the fourth and fifth grades at that time, at the end of 2025, the only non-integration affected placement classes would be the rising fifth graders. So we will really know what the district looks like from an enrollment standpoint, how the algorithm is working, how it assigns students, and we can make further transportation recommendations at that time. I'll yield the floor back to President Collins.
Thank you very much. So we've said K through 5 a few times. Are we saying pre-K through 5? Okay. I got a little message that's like, don't forget preschool. Okay, so pre-K through 5. All right. Thank you very much for that, President Joshua. I'm going to first check in because there she is. All right. Let me find, Trustee Hilton, would you like to go next, or would you like me to keep going from the dais?
You can keep going. I'm honestly, Madam President, I don't have anything else that I need to add.
Okay, all right, thank you. Ms. Adams?
Sure, thank you. I appreciate Board President Joshua's recommendation and the phasing in of this to, from year 23-24 to 24-25, doing it a little less impact. I think my comments earlier speak to my non-support for middle school students to be bused. The mandatory busing is already in place and always done, so it's, this is courtesy busing. So I would agree with Board President Joshua in the 1.5, basically what he laid out is what I'm in favor of. I would also ask the district and the Board of Ed to also focus on educating parents. There are a lot of new parents this area who come from, maybe more perceived dangerous communities, if you will, or more urban district that literally, except for the integration plan, the schools are, every school is walkable for most students in town. And as someone who put 5 kids through the school district, I can count on 2 hands the number of times I drove them to school. And, I was that mean mama who said, water won't kill you, you'll get wet, you'll be fine. And a lot of that is kind of lacking. And I would ask the school district and the Board of Ed to talk about the healthy nature, the healthy regard of walking to school, walking and picking up kids who are, down the block on the way, and that whole experience informs and educates and is healthy mentally for students. So I say all that because a lot of the issues I'm seeing and what we get called on a municipal level on a regular basis is for more traffic calming or pedestrian safety. And yet so many parents are driving their children. So now you have a colliding, if you will, in the, word sense, not necessarily cars and humans, but the more potential for pedestrians to be less safe is that there's more car and pedestrian interaction. And as someone who lives a block and a half from Tuscan School, when all those 5 children were going through the schools, cars were not parked in front of my house except for back to school night. And now it's a daily thing. And I understand jobs and commuting and catching the train. I understand everything because all of that's existed for as long as I've been here, since 1989. So I would just ask the district to maybe do a better job, and the schools in particular, in kind of saying to parents, it's okay that the abduction rate has not gone up since 1920. Maybe never. So, to just kind of calm those feels and kind of promote the walkable aspect of our school district to make the pedestrians safer and to also be healthier and better for the students. So I know that's a little bit of a deviation from what we're talking about here, but it's also not, because, yeah, I just would like that to be something that the school district and the elementary schools kind of, and the PTAs to just promote the pedestrian aspect and the walkability of our school district as well. But as I said, while Board Chair Joshua was out of the room, I agree entirely with your recommendation going forward. So I just wanted to reiterate that for you. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, Dr.
Thank you.
Taylor.
I appreciate your comments, and I just wanted to share with this body, in case you weren't aware, that for the last few years, I've met with the local realtors. And I present to them, just as I would to a full board meeting or a town hall, about our intentional integration plans and the transportation and all those things, so that they can't say that they didn't know when they sold a home to someone who was maybe being told that they would definitely be going to blank school, right? And they have been very receptive to that. And I know also, we've been working with a couple of small foundations, sharing, with the schools, healthy walking stuff, right? And so, I think that that's a great idea to continue to plant that seed that, some of us had to deal with when we were younger.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
I would just respond to that a little because when we moved here in 1989, my daughter was in second grade. And one of the reasons we chose Maplewood was because we lived in the 19th ward in the city of Rochester, and she was the first kid picked up on the bus in the morning and the last one dropped off. And so she was car sick, if you will, in school and after. So the walkability and the fact that she could walk to all three schools was like one of the number one reasons we moved here. So I'd like people to keep remembering that.
Trustee Brown?
Yeah, not much to add. I'm just shocked that it was Councilwoman Adams who basically told the kids to toughen up, and I'm supposed to be the coach here. Yeah. I'm missing football practice here. You made me feel as though that was my football moment. In terms of the options, I don't think there is a simple solution. Obviously, we wouldn't be here in this emergency meeting, but I think intentional integration is absolutely like making sure it's intentional, but also intelligent. And so when I hear councilman or town, I don't know all the terms, trustee, your trustee, council, all that, Frank McGahee, talk about the integration and what could be impacted by making the radius too small. So the 1.0 versus 1.5, it seems as though it would impact negatively or potentially impact negatively our intentional integration. And that's challenging for me, but at the same time, no costs matter. So I'm committed to doing a lot more deep dive in this. I don't want to my statement tonight would be more emotional than it would be intellectual. So I honestly, I tip my hat to all the work that has been done and commit to doing the work and learning more about it. I have a fourth grader and a sixth grader. And, I think the two of them, I absolutely trust my sixth grader to walk to school. There is no way on God's green earth that I'm going to trust my fourth grader. You got to know him. You got to meet him. Personality, right? And so, but that difference is what we're talking about. That the maturity, right? When we talk about eliminating middle school. So understanding the pre-K through 5 is they are not only the future of our intentional integration, but not to get too cliche, but when we look at them, we're even more concerned about them, their development, and every single day in terms of how they are impacted by what goes on. Their experience is drastically more fragile, if you will, than a 12-year-old. And so I commit to doing more work on it. I can understand where the 1.0 for pre-K through 5 would make the most sense to make sure the intentional integration is not disrupted. But the cost of it is what is giving me pause. And so I think, hearing board president give a little more hesitation or caution to limiting that radius such and saying 1.5, I commit to doing more work on it. And again, I'm making the statement because I want you guys to know I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing and how sensitive this is, and you're impacting people's kids. And that's always going to be an emotional situation. I tend to turn the volume down on social media on purpose. I'm too busy talking about sports. And so I know that there's a lot of emotion in this room, and so I commit to doing more work to figure out what would be the best solution. I do love the fact that from a civic duty standpoint, we're here trying to figure out what's best. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Trustee Brown. I'm putting you again because we're not doing a vote in the middle and open for more information.
Very fair. I would probably be in the middle of the two options that have been discussed. If I had to say today, the straw poll, I don't even want to put the
Are you
radius. But yeah.
Are you trying to pull a 1.25? Is that what you're trying to get to?
It seems like the 1.4 versus 1.5 already set off an alarm with all the work that you guys did. So yes, I'm between with commitment to do a lot more work on this to figure out what's best.
I appreciate that, Trustee Brown. Trustee Hilton, I'm going to circle back and just see if there's any additional thing you wanted to add as a result of listening to some of the colleagues up here.
Thank you so much, Madam President. The only thing I have to add is I really do appreciate the board president's comments, and I agree with his recommendation that I'm going to take his lead on if that's how he feels that is the best way for our district.
And so your preference would lean more towards the 1.5? And then potentially phasing in? I want to make sure I restate it correctly.
Well, I guess you're asking.
For the 20
No, I'm asking Trustee Hilton.
Honestly, I would rather stay neutral at this point and move forward with some more facts. But I appreciate that. I'm happy that we're hearing now more details, but I don't want to be pinned down onto a specific recommendation yet.
Understood. And no pressure on this. We're all learning. Just so you're aware, some numbers have changed. We were able to have a preliminary meeting to make sure that we were being as transparent as possible with members of the public as it relates to this issue. But even I'm writing a lot of notes right now because the numbers were actually a lot more advantageous, what was presented tonight in terms of cost. I guess I'll move on to my comments then, is that I was hard at a 1.5 a few nights ago when we were looking at the budget, just because I don't want us to go above roughly about 1%. You know how people don't have a ceiling based on, the number of students and all that. I would feel a lot more comfortable, and I think it also compels our colleagues on the Board of Education to find if there's more opportunities to cut within the budget, to partner with the municipalities to see if we can work with our state representatives. And I do have to commend the district completely because, again, the intentional integration program is being watched from all areas of the state. So I think where our agreement is we all want it to succeed. And I also acknowledge that by creating equitable transportation policies, a lot of people who claimed hardship because they previously were getting the courtesy transportation, it's going to welcome a whole new group of families who never had transportation now to be getting transportation as a result of this intentional integration plan. So I imagine you're going to make some people very, very happy. Now, we know we're always going to disappoint the person who's the 0.9 below, whether we choose the 1.75, 1.5, 1.25, 1, et cetera. In fact, I'm sure we have some residents who don't want to walk next door. So I realize the significance of this. I would love for us to get to 1 mile. I think that would be amazing. If we can get to 1 mile, like keep it below 1% above the tax levy cap. So my preference, and I realize there's a little bit of a split right here, and I think we might actually even share in that belief, is that the more work we can do between our municipalities, advocacy, working with the governor's office, our state legislators, maybe helping roll up our sleeves to actually address the budget, any additional support we can give, even though it's not our statutory role, is if we can cover all elementary school, pre-K through 5 at the 1 mile and be able to do that at 1 tax percentage point for our residents, which annual reoccurring, again, that works out to $148 for Maplewood residents and $173 for South Orange. From our perspective, also on the municipal side, where the schools is 57% of the budget, we're 28% of the budget, sometimes 27, and then 1% for reserves. So each one of our tax percentage points is probably going to be about $55. And so when you're looking at the totality of what this year is going to be, especially with the increases in healthcare, it's going to be a really tough year. And so I don't think it's going to be a year where the school budget may necessarily all in come in below 2%. So that's why I want to be a little bit more conservative with trying to shoot for 1% and see if the prices get a little bit better. If it gets less than $110,000 a bus, I actually don't think subscription is going to be a viable option now, knowing that it's $110,000 a bus route, because that actually works out to close to a little bit over to $2,500 for a family to subscribe. And I think that's very cost prohibitive and nothing close to what we have heard that other districts may have locked in at another time. I will admit that I mistakenly had heard talking points that it was $1,000 per student. And so it's like, I think confidently we could probably do this. And now seeing some of these numbers that we're having as a result of labor, supply chain, et cetera. So I want to support 1 mile, but I'd like to see the school district see if you can get to that 1 mile in elementary and be able to do it within 1% above the tax levy cap. And I just made a little note of where everybody is right now. So for direction to the Board of Education is that, no, you have what seems to be full support.
I just want to add.
Yes,
one clarifying
absolutely.
question.
Go ahead.
I apologize. So that's, sorry, Ms. Scott. Mr. Burnside, I just want to clarify, these numbers are additional transportation, right? So they're not covering 2 mile people that we are statutorily obligated to do right now.
Correct.
Thank you.
And that's actually a great point that you didn't cover, is that also your special education students, et cetera, statutorily you provide transportation, and that is the overall bulk of the transportation budget, if I'm correct,
Based on their IEPs, yes.
based on their IEPs.
That's in and out of district. Out of district is totally separate from this.
Yes, I saw those numbers. They are, they're certainly significant. So if I want to restate this and make sure all the board members are okay with what I'm restating, is that I think the direction is that there's full support from those who have a strong opinion at this point with 1.5 miles, like that's a go, and that the preference is absolutely to be 1 mile and to get this number down as much as possible. And if need be, I will support 1 mile, but I want to make sure that I do my work to help you as much as possible, lobbying for the state aid, seeing if we can bring a little bit light on the work that the district is doing, doing some review of your budget to feel comfortable. And if all those boxes are checked, then I'm absolutely going to support the 1 mile. Did I state that correctly for everyone? Great. Do our, I'm sorry?
No, I
Ms.
just wanted
Adams?
to, when we talk about the subscription services and it being a burden, I guess I would ask the school district to consider, to look at, instead of a full-blown, courtesy busing program, or full-blown subscription, maybe there's somewhere in the middle that could be talked about or considered.
I want to ask a question to Mr. Burnside and Dr. Taylor about that. If we go that way, it's not a subscription bus and then a courtesy bus and then a 2 mile bus. It's one bus that could have people who are over 2 miles and are statutorily obligated, people who are getting it courtesy because of the district, and people who are paying via subscription. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah,
And-
because I just wanted to look at, a way to maybe help with the cost for subscription, but not lay the whole burden on the taxpayer for completely courtesy. That makes sense.
And on that subscription.
Got it.
On that subscription model, if you actually think about it, I know it's a jarring figure of $2,500 a year for 180 days, but it is $14 a day for the people who are looking for convenience. I'm talking about they're half a mile away, but they'd rather just have the transportation. Is that versus the surge pricing we're seeing with Uber or being late for work, having to take a later train, loss of work. So there might very well be families who have the means to be able to support that. So I see no harm in your due diligence that you're doing and offering it and seeing if there is the appetite. Because when you look at $14 a day, it's almost like a New Jersey Transit pass, right?
Right.
Is that you're looking for convenience.
And that's what I would say, like maybe there's a program you could offer those who, need it, if it's just subscription.
And just to clarify, I don't think we have a real number as to what the subscription price is going to be. We're just guessing right now, but based on what we've seen other districts offer, it would probably be comparable. I still, I'll leave that open-ended, and we don't need to get into, but it's, and the second thing that I wanted to point out is that when everyone's choosing to say that I am looking at element K-5 school and I am okay with what is happening with middle school, it does not mean we're not offering busing to middle school.
Yeah.
It just means we're offering statutory busing that is greater than 2 miles. That is as it is today. That's just wanted to clarify that for other people who are listening in. They're like, oh, we're not taking away busing from middle school. That's the last headline we want. It stays as is today. It's just that we're not adding any additional busing for next year.
Just to clarify that point, right, my understanding right now is that we only, I think the Hillcrest neighborhood is generally the only neighborhood that gets transportation to middle school. And I think this year it's to SOMS through the intentional education algorithm, but previous years it was MMS. But that's really it. And the change actually was like a net of one student from what we saw from the algorithm report. Projection, I guess.
Madam Chairwoman, so since we're talking about the subscription-based platform,
Yes,
and
sir.
we don't have a lot of information about it right now.
We have none. Yeah.
I want a ton more information because I see a potential equity issue here. And I would need more clarity on how that would work, how you're eligible, the cost of it. I'm very reluctant to be on favor of any type of subscription model, knowing the inequities of our community as they are. So I want to see all the data, the pricing, what if someone doesn't pay? There's a lot of factors in a subscription-based business, be it busing or streaming or whatever, to understand how that model works before we add that into our holistic plan for transportation.
So you've got a few folks who are going to respond back to you. You're very popular. I think one is going to start with any subscription model has to support free for the students who qualify for free and reduced lunch.
Yeah.
And so Dr. Taylor, did you want to address that?
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page. But the complication comes in having a complete design to review and approve. It takes time, right? And so I wouldn't want all the folks who are doing that work to do it if there isn't a likelihood of it becoming a part of what we're going to do. And so I think with the 1 mile piece, that seems to have support at 1% cap increase, that would be our focus moving forward, to give you as much granular info as we could on that, because trying to give you all the ins and outs of what subscription would have would take just a mountain of work, and we may not go forward with it, right? So I would ask for some grace with that before our next meeting to allow us to come back with the information that is most likely to be considered.
100%, Dr. Taylor. And also, with a subscription-based model, are you outsourcing this program? Are there other corporations or consultants that have done it before? Is it in-house? There are a lot of things that are going to subscription-based businesses that I know a little bit about. So I'm just want to be really cognizant that holistically, it seems like a great idea. But when you start to get into the logistics of it, there's a lot to unpack. And we would want to unpack everything, respectfully understand that the equity's there, but also understand their complexities. And then the models can be, are they monthly? Are they semester based? And then is there a certain threshold of money you have to provide? There's a lot that goes into subscription-based businesses. So the nature of it, I know quite well. So just want all that information before we even put that as a part of the complete package for transportation. Thanks.
You bet. President Joshua?
Thank you, President Collins. A question for Mr. Burnside. Our Cessus Co-op, I know they came and spoke to our committee about co-op options, and they operate, I don't want to say towns because I don't want to be inaccurate, but I know if, we using them, they've got a lot of experience doing co-ops in different towns. Maybe they are more similar to us or less similar from a socioeconomic standpoint. Is there anything else you can add about that, about their experience operating subscription plans and your confidence in using them to put one forth if we were to go that way?
Yeah, so, we had them come to our FFT meeting. We did have a presentation from our Sussex County Co-op on subscription busing. They do charge a fee. It was worth every penny. They actually work directly with the parents. They get the money from the parents. It's really out of the hands of the district. And I'm not sure what else you want.
So just to add to, we had a very preliminary discussion in one of the previous FFT meetings. And one thing that was unanimous was that we should look at all these edge cases, in the sense that What happens if the student is free and reduced lunch? What happens when this thing? So my answer to you is we don't have enough information right now. But when we get back to you, we'll make sure that all of these different categories are hit. And they're, and obviously, I mean, this is the board this is the body that's going to decide. So we want to make sure that we give you all the information we have. I mean, there's no holding back or hiding because we're all in it together. I mean, at the end of it, it's our kids.
Yeah, and I appreciate that comment. I think really what I'm saying is that when we meet again, that we need you've had a meeting, we didn't, right? So you have more information than I do. So, I want the information so I can assess what makes most sense in the interest of our community, inclusive of a subscription-based business. But as I hear right now, I have more questions, and it opens up, a lot to unpack. And so just like I had this deck and I read through it and I read the next deck, I would like the same information as well. So I appreciate that.
And I think it might be beneficial to actually have them come and give the presentation.
Okay, so I thank all my colleagues. This was a very good spirited conversation. I want to make sure that we do get to the public comment. Before we do, well, I know Mr. Bond sent me, we do in person first, and then we go to, oh, I love, thank you so much, but just, all right, so if we can get the sign-up list, I'd appreciate it. And the other thing I just want to add, and I know my colleagues from the municipal side would agree with this, is that we acknowledge that we need to play a role in safer routes to schools, that this is not entirely about the school district, the policy and transportation, but as you know, we are doing our best to improve the situations around schools. We know that there's many intersections that are problematic. Our police chief has been working with Dr. Taylor and has been meeting with Board President Joshua to firm up as we head into next year how we look at hazardous routes different from this past year, because in many instances, I don't think we did get it right, and we have to improve that as well. And then there's infrastructure needs. I can just point to 3rd and Ridgewood in South Orange as being so problematic. We know where those hot spots are and know that on the municipal side, in our respective committees and budget workshops, we're going to be talking about this exact same issue about walkability, safe routes to schools, and making sure that all of your children are safe if they do not have transportation.
Thanks.
Okay?
Dr. Stitt, before we go to that, Dr. Stitt, I know you have met with the police chiefs earlier this week. Is there anything related to this issue that they shared that we're comfortable sharing this evening?
Sure. We had a meeting, our annual meeting with our board president, BA, our director of safety and security, as well as both police chiefs. We sign off on and discuss our MOU that guides our partnerships. And we also had a great conversation around if they have noticed in their departments or with the folks who report to them a significant increase in traffic concerns around our schools. And they both had the same answer, that it was typical and customary. There wasn't anything that stood out above and beyond previous school years. And there was, of course, a concern around unintended consequences, understanding that if dozens and dozens of buses are added to our community, that can also bring consequences that we don't anticipate, such as traffic jams or folks who object to additional pollution, or some of our streets that are very small having multiple buses on at the same time. But overall, what they share with us, and what I also observe personally, I visit the schools often, as you can imagine, and those schools who've been most impacted by this decision, I've been able to visit them while their buses are in action and while their parents are being picked up and dropped off, et cetera. While kids are being dropped off by their parents, apologies. Parents are being dropped off too sometimes too. And there wasn't a significant shift from the previous challenges that they were familiar with.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Is there the sign-in list for?
Have it right here.
Please note that public speaks is not a time for dialogue with the Board of Education. It is an opportunity for you to share a comment with the Board of Education. In addition, by law, administrators and Board of Education members are not permitted to publicly discuss personnel matters, student discipline, or other issues requiring confidentiality. While we may not respond to comments, all input shared with the Board of Education is taken very seriously and will inform future deliberations and work by the Board of Education and its committees.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burnside. All right. Ms. Murphy, are you with us? You know what? Pause, don't start yet. Mr. Bonds, how many people are signed up via WebEx? Three, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. That's 8 people. I'm okay with 3 minutes then. Any objections, colleagues?
No.
Okay, great. Let's go with 3 minutes then.
Thank you so much. My name is Allison Murphy. Some of what I have in my statement here, we sort of talked about tonight, but I'm going to read this because I think it reflects my feelings as a parent at the current moment in the district. Tonight, I'd like to address what feels like some absurdities in transportation in the current October 2022 situation based on this decision by the board. I'm a proud Seth Boyden parent, and I live in South Orange's Village Colonials neighborhood near Our Lady of Sorrows and Bethel, just so you can sort of orient where I am. In 2016, my older son opted into kindergarten at Seth Boyden, which is a decision that we made because we wanted a diverse learning experience for him, and we love it there. We had opted, at the time when we opted in, we were zoned for South Mountain, and so we would have received a bus no matter which school he went to. Now, because we're 1.9 miles from Seth Boyden, so 1.9 miles, my younger son no longer receives a bus. Every morning and every afternoon on the way to Seth Boyden, we pass our neighbors waiting for a bus to take their students 1.2 miles to another school that's closer to us. According to the district, this is because walking through South Orange Village is a hazardous route, and I agree. But a young child going 1.9 miles across Parker and Boyden and Springfield is safe. The district and the Board of Ed seem to pass the buck saying that hazardous routes are determined by the towns. So I think that it's time that we reevaluate these routes, and President Collum, you said that we're doing this, which is wonderful to hear. I think it's time that we reevaluate all routes as more students are now walking with the intentional integration changes. Making this even more absurd is the fact that twice a day, a Seth Boyden bus with only a handful of students goes up 2nd Street past the home of Seth Boyden students. This is the very same bus that used to stop for us and now no longer does. Seth Boyden has 4 buses every day. This is the same number of buses and drivers and aides as last year, but fewer riders. So it seems to me that the district and the taxpayers are paying the same costs as last year, but simply serving fewer students. So let me close by saying I'm hopeful for creative, equitable solutions that offer more transportation to more working, commuting families. I want our intentional integration plan to succeed and thrive. Thank you for the time tonight.
Thank you very much, Ms. Murphy. Hopefully some of the discussion tonight has been informative, and hopefully you're pleased by it. Board Member Malaspina, welcome, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. I am asking that this presentation be made public to the entire public and to the board members. We have not seen this presentation previously or gotten the numbers. So I appreciate all the work that went into it, but I would like it to be made public so that we could all see it and everybody in the public see it also. Also, I would just like to say that I know that sometimes I'm conflicted, so I don't get information, but I did speak to my colleague here that is also here tonight, and this is the first that either of us have heard some of this information. So I appreciate this meeting for this being allowed to happen, and for us to start to have those conversations. Now, I know I can't always be a part of the conversations, but I just want to push to make sure that those who can get included, and so that this is not, you're not believing that, the full board has had discussions, because it hasn't on these topics, at least that I know of. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Malaspina. And I echo that. I know that everyone was scrambling to make sure we had really good numbers. So we just got the printout before we sat down, and the numbers were even a little bit different. Is it okay? I'm sure you will post it to the school district website. And then I can assure you that myself and Mayor Daffis will have it posted on the respective municipal websites. And I do believe the meeting is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube.
I'm going to correct the typo for the
Let's-
buses.
There was one typo to be corrected, then we'll get the final version.
Oh, the number of buses will be adjusted on that. All right. Thank you very much, Board Member Malaspina. Next up, Miss Kelly Piccola? Piccola? Yes, Piccola. I knew it.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Piccola, as Mayor Collins said. Sorry, Village President, I can't ever get that right. Anyway, I have two children at South Mountain School who actually ride the ultimate courtesy bus called the shuttle between the annex and the big school. I'm here not because of my own children, but the decisions that have impacted our community, I find incredibly inequitable. So I have a few questions. Mr. Burnside commented that we are using larger buses because of the supply chain issues. What, if anything, is the board doing now to ensure that those larger buses are full? Why are we using those larger buses and not filling the seats? There are families who would happily fill those seats with their students and be transported to school. My second question is for Board President Joshua. You stated that the number of students 2 miles or more from schools will be decreasing as a Seth Boyden opt-in ends and intentional integration increases. I don't understand how that happens, and maybe I misunderstood the comment, but with intentional integration, I don't understand how the distance from school or between a child's residence and a school decreases. And my last question is, there's been some discussion about designated hazardous routes. When additional routes are added to that list, how, if at all, will that impact current transportation? So, for example, if an additional hazardous route is designated tomorrow, for example, will that impact current transportation? I thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
There we go. I'm going to continue going. I wrote all three questions down. I'm going to continue going through them, see if we get some more questions, and then we'll circle back and answer them in case somebody else has a similar question, et cetera. So next, I'm moving on to Miss Sarah Connolly.
My name is Sarah Connolly. I live in South Orange. I have a fifth grader who goes to Bolden, and we are, per the district, we're 1.92 miles from the school. Per my Google Maps, we're over 2 miles. Ms. Adams, you made the point earlier about encouraging families to have their children walk to school, and I would love that. I really would. It's a great part of our community. It's why I love living in South Orange and being able to walk to town and so forth. But based on tonight's presentation, and I'm assuming that the slides that showed the number of students impacted are reflecting current numbers, you're talking about approximately 770 kids who are ages 5 to 11 who are being asked to walk 1 to 2 miles to and from school. Now that means that a student who lives, what is the Cedar Ridge Cafe now called? Yellow Rose. So a student who lives by Yellow Rose is being asked to walk from there all the way over to Marshall. Okay, that means they're walking down Ridgewood, they're crossing South Orange Avenue, they're crossing Bose, they're crossing Scotland, and then they're crossing Grove. Okay? That's a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. This doesn't work. That's dangerous on so many levels. Just last week, I was driving my son and a neighbor's son to school, and we watched a child trying to cross Valley. And an aggressive driver tried to cut around a stopped car and came within inches of hitting this little boy. He stood in the middle of the street crying, right, on his way to school. And this is what we've done. We as a community have allowed this situation to happen. 770 students is really different than what the board has presented up to this point. 770 students is not 92 families. These are a lot of kids. This is a big problem today. Looking forward, I think, Ms. Adams, you also made this point that you'd like to see what the numbers look like for the cost of transportation in 5 years or 10 years. And I think it would be really helpful to understand what our numbers will look like as the integration plan rolls out. because as President Joshua mentioned, it does seem like some of these numbers will go down, that you won't have 770 students in 2 years or 3 years needing this transportation. And I think it would be helpful for this group of folks to have those numbers in determining costs of future transportation. And if I'm allowed to ask questions, I had two related to the costs that you've mentioned. Somebody said that it was $1.2 million. $1.2 million in savings from outsourcing the buses. And I've also seen a line item for $1.5 million that was saved from cutting busing for Bolden and Marshall students. So I would like some clarity and understanding. Did the $1.2 million come from outsourcing and selling our buses? And is that separate from the savings that the district incurred from eliminating busing for Marshall Bolden students?
Thank
Thanks
you very
very
much. You got it in there, Ms. Connolly. Thank you for your comments. All right, and last we are going to Erin Harper. Are you with us?
Hello, and thank you for letting me speak, and thank you all for, especially tonight, with your openness to consider something different. I feel optimistic from hearing from every single one of you, so thank you for that. I just offering my story as just more fuel for that fight. I'm not asking to be an exception, and I'm here first and foremost to support the integration policy that the school district is in process of. My story is that we opted into Seth Boyden. I live in Tuxedo Park, which is about 2 blocks from Newark, behind Seton Hall, and I have 9-year-olds now, and we opted into Seth Boyden in 2017. We were told at that time that we were 2 miles away, so we could get a bus to Seth Boyden. So we've been riding Jimmy's bus. I love Jimmy. We've been riding Jimmy's bus with other, at first it was just us, and now there are 4 families that ride that bus, which is a block from my house, to Seth Boyden. And that bus is still a block away, and it's still Jimmy, and all the families except me and one other on varsity are still riding that bus, and we're not riding that bus this year. And my kids are 9, and so I really appreciate all the communication with the superintendent and Ms. Talmadge helping me understand that we were always thought we were 2 miles away, but they told us they did find one route that was 1.94, and it's through Newark and Irvington except for 2 blocks. And so I said, okay, kids, because there are times we're 1-car family, and there are going to be times when we have to walk. And we walked it, and I took pictures of several intersections that don't have crossing guards. And there's only 1 crossing guard on that whole 1.9 route for my 2 9-year-olds, and it took us 50 minutes to get to school. And yeah, it's through Irvington and Newark, and it's a hectic traffic situation. It's hectic. And I'm imagining probably with the integration policy, I'm imagining there are probably some kids in the Hilton neighborhood are probably walking the same route to go to Marshall if we're really switching kids up, with which we should be. So that's my story. It's a little hectic right now. We're going to do it. We're going to adapt because I respect the policy for everybody. And but this is like probably a rare thing that slipped, you know. I hope that isn't the situation for a lot of kids right now, but that's what kind of happened with this policy. And yeah, when the buses that we've been riding is like a block away, and you know, from the beginning of the route to the end of the route, it's pretty empty right now, and we're not riding it. So we'll adapt, but thank you for considering that as we move forward. And also, I was told that the crossing guards, it's the responsibility of the town. So do I talk to Newark and Irvington Police Department about crossing guards? I'm wondering if that's what I should do next. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harper. Okay, that is everybody who had signed up for in-person public speaks. And so now I'm going to go to okay, so thank you very much, Mr. Bonds. Farah Kadestin, are you on WebEx?
Unfortunately, that community member isn't present.
Maybe she was pleased with us. Is Julia Flath with us?
Hi, I'm here. Okay.
We can hear.
Great. As Kelly Piccola also mentioned, I want to point out that the numbers of students who need transportation are not necessarily going to go down every year. And if I understand correctly, the numbers in the presentation are based on last year's numbers, since they said they don't have this year's numbers yet, let alone projections for next year. Last year was the first year of the intentional integration initiative, so only one grade, kindergarten, was affected. Each year a new grade is added, plus any other new students in the district. And I've read that approximately 40% of students assigned by the algorithm are assigned to a school more than a mile from their house. So even though Marshall Bolden and Seth Boyden transportation needs will phase out, that will be offset by the increase in students assigned far from their neighborhood school by the integration initiative. So I would encourage the district to put together a real 5-year projection for the public and the Board of School Estimates to have a full picture of, how this is going to affect transportation needs and the budget going forward. I also want to introduce myself as the chair of the new South Orange Mobility Action Committee, and in that role, I look forward to working with the towns and the school district on improving safe routes and walkability related to school. To Councilwoman Nancy Adams' point, some things have changed here since the 90s, which can help explain why more parents are driving their kids to school. There's likely many more dual working families who don't have as much time to walk their kids to school and would appreciate a bus. And obviously the integration initiative means that parents don't get a say anymore, whether they are living in a place where they can walk their kids to school. I also see the opportunity to promote biking to school, as that's a real viable alternative for the 1 to 2 mile distance. And that is something that we could work on this year to help get cars off the road for both traffic safety and greenhouse gas emission purposes. By the district making sure there are bike racks at every school, since there are not currently. So I've had, parents reach out to me and say, oh, I'd love to bike to school. Can you give me advice on it? But, oh, there's not actually a bike rack at my kid's school, so I don't know exactly what we would do. I think it's great that the hazardous routes are going to be analyzed. When I talked to the South Orange Police Force, they basically told me they didn't have the manpower to work on that. And I do want to encourage that it's analyzed comprehensively and not just based on whoever speaks up the loudest and only looking at those routes, because that often ends up inequitable. And also wondering if there's a way for people who don't use the bus to just opt out of busing and make those spots available for others. So that sums up my comments. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Flath. And next we are on to Dale Short. Is Mr. Short with us?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now.
Good evening, Mr. Short. We can see you and hear you.
All right, great. I guess first, I just want to say that, clearly I support the mission of increasing the quality of our schools, and I certainly am sympathetic to all the parents who are being held hostage by the integration plan, transportation issues. But I'm here to represent the South Orange taxpayer. A budget is the amount of money you have to do the things you want to do, and you have to figure out how to make it work. A budget is not the final bill for everything you could possibly think of doing. The conversations that are happening now should have happened before the integration plan was put into place, and this should have been accounted for by the school board when they decided on this plan. The town should do its work to ask the hard questions of the school board about changes to the program that could be made so that we're not paying for a transportation disaster in perpetuity. Why haven't things like school choice been looked at? Why aren't hardship transfers that are race neutral being entertained? The plan needs to be changed. As Sheena said, everybody in the state is looking at us, and there's a reason nobody else is doing this, because this is a disaster. This is a total logistics nightmare that has been created, and this is not a sustainable plan.
Mr. Short, was that the end of your comments?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Bonds, is there anybody else that has indicated a desire to address the BSE?
Not at this time.
All right, we did it, Mr. Bonds. We made a very good team. Awesome. All right, so now we need to go through and address some of the questions. First, one of the things that was asked was regarding the larger buses not being full. What can be done about that? We talked about the 54 passenger buses. Can people opt out of that? I think ultimately is what's the better way when we're seeing buses at half capacity, and if students and their parents choose not to use the bus.
So I think that the unintended consequences are probably the biggest part of that conversation. And I know we've spoken about equity a number of times this evening. And so one of our folks who spoke to us this evening, thank you for participating, spoke about an equitable approach. And so if we as a district have a bus that is not full and we allow folks to get on, in my opinion, every student who lives that distance from their school should also have the same opportunity. That's an equitable approach to solving that concern. I know that Mr. Burnside, as he mentioned earlier, on October 15th, which is our snapshot for the school district's year, we'll be working with our vendor to do a capacity review of our buses and our routes to determine what, if anything, can be done to alleviate that concern.
Great, thank you for that. And you said that was being done in November, a capacity now? October 15th.
That's the snapshot.
Oh my.
date, and so the next month.
Dr. Taylor, that's next week.
Yeah, that's the date.
All
That's the
right.
next date, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Next we have a question about the understand. Next, we had a question about the impact at Seth Boyden, with one of our speakers inquiring. They couldn't quite understand what you were saying, President Joshua, about potentially having less people once KN1 are back at Seth Boyden. Could you provide a little bit of clarification for that?
I'll defer to Dr. Taylor, who understands the plan as well as I do, about that. Go ahead.
So that comment was speaking about the additional capacity at a number of schools, but in particular, Bolden and Marshall and Seth Boyden having a greater capacity. So we use the capacity of seats, obviously, to assign students. And if there are more seats available in those schools, there's a likelihood that those students would be closer to their building than they currently are because of the limited space assignments that we have currently in district.
The only thing I would add is that the goal, from my understanding, is from the algorithm is not to assign students over 2 miles. It's to
Exactly.
keep them within 2 miles.
Right, and one of the things that we shared a number of times in our town hall events, when we were collecting information on our integration possibilities, is that parents were surprised that they lived closer than 2 miles to a number of schools. And that was an advantage that our district had over other school districts.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. We also had an inquiry. How will designated hazardous routes impact current transportation? And that's a little bit complicated because you're working through the hazardous routes policy with our local police departments, engineers, and planners. So if you don't have an answer, you can just say, don't know.
Oh, no, so the Board of Education and the FFT committee requested that we review how other districts are doing this. That's what we're doing. We're collecting more information and outside of our professional experience, other folks, and seeing if there are any best practices out there that could apply to our circumstances.
So I think more the question was the financial impact. So with a designated hazardous route, right, if it meets a certain criteria, that's put out in state statute, then there could be an increase in students. But I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, then the Board of Education is obligated to provide transportation to those students. So you might see some more that are eligible. Hopefully, they might be covered in 1.5 miles. So there might be overlap, but I don't think there's an answer to that yet because we only have, at least in South Orange, we have the four, and I'm not familiar with how many Maplewood has right now. So I guess stand by on that for more information.
Yes, just stand by. It's also in our policy. We list those hazardous routes currently.
Okay. Sure. President Joshua?
Yeah, I guess my question is for Dr. Taylor and Mr. Burnside to take back is if we go down to 1 mile, and I don't know if that's going to happen, I don't think hazardous routes matter anymore because almost anyone who's you're either within a mile and you wouldn't qualify for a hazardous route anyway, or you're going to be getting transportation. Is that accurate?
I don't know if it would eliminate them altogether.
Well, I'm not eliminating the route, but I'm eliminating the idea that you're getting a route solely because of hazardous transportation.
Board President.
Hazardous route.
Board President Joshua, they would still qualify even if they are within the mile, if they lived along a hazardous route that's been designated by the board.
Thank you for that. Miss, is it Febris? Very nice to meet you. So the next question that we also had was, hold on. I know you normally write them down, but I write them down too, and my handwriting's better than, oh yeah, go ahead.
There was a comment around the number 770 students versus 92 families that was utilized. We're talking about two different things. So to ensure that we all leave with the same information, the 92 families that were mentioned previously were impacted by the ending of courtesy busing. The 770 students are the total number of students in those grade levels who live that distance. So they may not be impacted by the change in policy, but they would be impacted by the shift potentially in determination of transportation opportunities.
Sorry, quick word, positively impacted.
Positively impacted, yes, positively impacted. Thank you.
And then, Ms. Harper, thank you for sharing your story. You did ask whether or not you should reach out to Newark. I think you have my email address. It's scollum@southorange.org. If you send that request to me of where the areas are, I can work through South Orange Police Chief Murillo, who has a good relationship with the Newark Police Chief. And rather than you try and submit it, let's try and do it as a team and see if we can get some help over there. Ms. Flath had asked some questions. One of the things that she raised was, can we get some more bicycle racks at the schools? No, bike racks, so that families can bicycle there.
I have to give that to Mr. Burnside.
It's funny, she mentions that Mr. Gilio, our Director of Facilities, and I were walking in front of the high school the other day, and we noticed there's a need. We're on it.
That's wonderful. We certainly in the municipalities like the bike racks too.
Yes.
And then there was also, okay, what do you have next in your notes?
All right. There was a mention of comprehensive hazardous route review instead of one-off requests, and we do agree with that approach as well. And when speaking with our police partners, to my understanding, that's their methodology as well, to do a comprehensive review of hazardous route potential instead of doing one-off requests. There was also a question around a demographic study. And for those who may not be aware, we did engage with a demographer when planning the intentional integration, and we're now seeking a follow-up review now that we're almost 1.5 years into this work. The next comment that I noted was about our plan not being sustainable or a disaster. And I would just comment that I've been invited to multiple meetings around the state, including the legislator, to share our work. There's lots of folks who are interested and who appreciate the innovation that we are promoting in order for us to achieve what we know will benefit all of our students.
Those were the rest of your notes?
That's it.
Colleagues, did you catch any question that I might have missed? Okay, so I did receive, I'm breaking rules, but that's okay because we're making really good time. Mr. Bonds has indicated that somebody did raise their hand. And so if possible, I would like to elevate them and allow them to ask their question. Mr. Bonds, do you have a name?
Hello,
this is-
Jeffrey.
Nope.
Hi,
Hi.
can you hear me?
Hi, Mr. Bennett. Would you like to turn your video on or you just
Yes,
want to do audio?
I'll try to turn it on. Sorry, I haven't used WebEx before.
Only if you smile.
I'll just speak. Oh, there I am. Okay.
There you
So
go.
thank you very much for this meeting. Thank you to the members of the Board of Trustees and the Maplewood Township Committee. You guys have been very sympathetic for this and very proactive. I have a few things to say. So I would oppose, although I am almost 2 miles away from my child's school, I would oppose subscription busing as a model here. I don't think it would be fair because the kids who are at this distance, they haven't chosen to be at this distance. Like it's part of the integration plan, which requires some involuntary assignment. If we had subscription busing, even if we're only a few $100s per student, it would be like a tax applied randomly to people who have bad luck in the integration lottery. And we don't want that. We shouldn't want to have a system that has winners and losers. We should want to have a system where even if not everybody goes to their first choice school, it's still a good school for them and still nothing to worry about. I also don't, if we had subscription busing, the costs to families would be proportionally much, much higher than it would be to the district. South Orange and Maplewood, average household income is about $150,000. So if you're charging $500 or $1,000 a student, like with people's like post-tax, post-expense income, that's a lot of money. And even if you have like, 200 people paying a few $100s per student, like the proportional impact on the district's budget is very small since we have a budget of $150 million. The cost of subscription busing would be proportionally enormous for people who have below average incomes, who are just above the FRL eligibility threshold. For families who have 2 or 3 kids to pay for it, it would also be proportionally very large. Cumulatively, it would be very large too, over at least 6 years of elementary school. If we're going to be creating more hazardous routes, which I think we need to, we would be also eating into the quote unquote customer base for subscription busing too. And since South Orange Maplewood doesn't really have that many north, south, and east, west streets, I would think that there wouldn't be a lot of people at long distances who wouldn't get hazardous route busing. So like it wouldn't bring in that much money. And if we need help from the Sussex County Co-op, there must be administrative costs involved. Something we could do to save some cost is to change our placement method. Right now, a lot of kids, about 20% of the kids are placed at 1 to 2 miles. And that's a bad distance for us budgetarily because there's no state aid available for it. So if we change the placement method, perhaps with parental ranking, to have more kids under 1 mile or more kids over 2 miles, you would actually save money because busing over 2 miles qualifies for state aid and it's over $500 per student, which is a good amount of money. Thank you very much for your work. I hope we can have busing this year. The figures you gave show that we have an average of 21 kids per bus, and the state does allow us to overbook buses. So we can bus hundreds more kids this year. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Okay, so we have now closed our public comment period. Perfect timing because my battery is about to go dead. So you see it also here now. So colleagues, I'm just gonna go back to you and see if there's any final comments that anybody would like to add as a result of what we heard during the public comment period.
Motion to adjourn, Madam Chairwoman.
There we go. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. McGehee, second from Board President Joshua. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening.
Thank you all.